Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse, and I want to welcome Bill Schuster to the show. We are going to take a look at those 5 studio albums from the prog pop band Ambrosia. So let's get ready, and let's do this right after this. Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse, and I want to welcome Bill Schuster to the channel. I think this is the first time Bill and I have actually done a one-on-one episode. Correct? Am I correct?
You are correct.
Holy crap. Bill and I are going to do a general overview of the Ambrosia catalog. If anybody, well, I don't know who's familiar with Ambrosia anymore, but originally they started out like, they formed in 1970 in LA. They had 5 top 40 singles released between 1975 and 1980. How Much I Feel, Biggest Part of Me, and top 20 hits, You're the Only Woman, and Holding On to Yesterday. This band is still touring. They don't have their lead vocalist and guitarist David Pack anymore, but the rest of the members are still together and they still tour. As far as I know, these guys all came from Southern California. They all started out back in the day, and originally they were a progressive rock band.
Oh, yeah.
Those first 2 records, well, I'll hold them up here. Holy mackerel. Prog masterpieces. Wouldn't you agree, Bill?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, some people, look at these other records because look at, You're the Only Woman, and, by the time they got to these 2 records, they kind of got more pop-oriented. But still, I don't have a problem with those records at all. I don't know about how you feel about it, but I think they're great.
I think they were just as great as a pop band as they were as a prog band.
Yeah, I agree 100%. But we're just going to go through the catalog and take a look at everything. Their first album, which was Ambrosia. This album came out in 1975. It was released on 20th Century Fox Records, which is long gone at this point. And it did spawn a top 20 single, Holding On to Yesterday. It also had a minor hit with Nice, Nice, Very Nice. This record, though, back in the day, was nominated for a Grammy for Best Engineered Recording, other than classical. Alan Parsons, who we know his work with Dark Side of the Moon, he was the mixdown engineer for this record. And he did come back as the producer for the second record. But for right now, we're going to start out looking at the first record, and I'm going to turn it over to Bill Schuster. Bill, like I said, welcome aboard. Nice to have you on today, you and your hat.
Thank you, Grant.
So what's your whole thoughts about this first record?
Oh, I think this thing's a classic from start to finish. But just a quick aside before I dive in.
Yep.
This isn't the original cover. I lost my original copy, unfortunately, but I found this, the first Alan Parsons Project album. Came out around the same time because they were so closely associated, and they played on the whole band. Ambrosia played on track The Raven, and Joe Puerta played on the song A Dream Within a Dream.
That's a good piece of trivia because I had no idea that they did. I had no idea.
And obviously, as you mentioned, Alan was very much associated with the first 2 Ambrosia albums, so they were pretty tight back in the mid 70s.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Hence with the pyramid theme as well, with the Alan Parsons related Dark Side of the Moon shirt.
That
guy's everywhere.
You are a stylish man. I'll give you that.
Let's hope this doesn't become the new trend, because this hat is awkward.
Yeah, well.
In fact, I think
you can take it off, Bill. You don't need to. We don't need that prop now.
All right, nice, very nice. Opens up this classic. Of course, one of the famous things about that song is the lyrics were primarily written by author Kurt Vonnegut. They are odd lyrics. This is actually one of the first Ambrosia songs I heard. Uh, my mom had a boyfriend around 1981, 82 who made a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
mixtapes for her, and there were multiple songs from this album and the final album, and a couple from their mid album. So, nice, nice, very nice, and Holding On to Yesterday were both on there from this. So I became very familiar with those songs long before the rest of the album. When I finally got the album, boy, there's a whole lot to digest here. These
Well,
guys,
mm-hmm.
it's kind of funny because of the hardcore progressive rock fans like to look at this first album and disassociate it from their later years when they had hits, and they tend to forget that Holding On to Yesterday was, in fact, a hit off this album. And so many people at the time undoubtedly saw them as a bit more of a pop band.
Right.
But
Yeah, but think about it. That first album, those hits were, well, I mean, they're kind of proggy, but I mean, what great tracks. I mean, I don't know. I think the fact that some of the people look at the later stuff and then disregard that. I'm just going to say all those Ambrosia albums are very solid. They never put out a bad release, you
no, I
know.
agree.
Yeah, they morphed, they turned into something else, but it was kind of a slow process. I mean, if you look at you know, life in LA, I mean, it still has some prog elements in there. It's not totally exactly. It's not totally, a commercial record, you know, but I don't know. I don't
I
know.
don't know, even on what would seem to be more mainstream pop songs on the
Hmm.
surface, there's all kinds of cool stuff going on with the arrangements, with the instrumentation, with
Hmm.
the playing. There's their own unique weirdness, even on what would appear to be pretty mainstream tracks on the surface.
I would agree. And then, by the time you get to the Alan Parsons album, this one's a lot more adventurous than the first album, I would say. I don't know what your opinion is on it, but I would say that second album is a lot more experimental than the first one. Maybe that's Alan Parsons, influence. I don't know, but I don't know. Hard to say.
I would say he had a pretty large influence there.
Hmm.
There's where the hat came from, actually. Part of the original packaging for the vinyl.
Yeah.
Sadly,
There's
that piece became
there's the
detached.
hat. Very
Yeah.
nice. See, I think I should have pulled it. I didn't think about it. I've got a copy of the first album, but I think it's the repressing that's on Warner Brothers. Because, like I said, they were on 20th Century, and then they originally got sucked up into Warner Brothers, and they did put those records out domestically on Warner Brothers. And I think that's what I should have pulled it. But yeah, that's what I've got. I've got one of those. Well, I've got the CD too, and the remasters came out on Warner Brothers back in the day.
Yeah, those took forever to come out, too. That's
Yeah, I think
what,
those came out. Oh my God, when did those come out? Early 2000s, maybe? I don't know. I don't have it up.
yeah, I was looking throughout a good chunk of the 90s trying to get those albums on CD to
Hmm.
go along or replace the time my vinyl copies. But in 97,
I've got
finally
that
something
too.
came out, this anthology. And there you go. This is lacking a lot of stuff I wish would have been on it at the time. But in 97, when I saw this in the store, I was just excited to have any Ambrosia on CD.
All right. Well, let me ask you this. If you were going to, let's say someone's watching this video and haven't heard much Ambrosia, would you recommend this greatest hits as a gateway drug into Ambrosia? Would you recommend that? Do you think that's a good comp?
Uh, I would have little quibbles, but overall, yeah, I would say it's fairly balanced. It has enough of their various musical identities on it.
Mm-hmm.
If
Well,
someone's more of a hardcore prog fan, I would definitely say dig a little deeper into the earlier stuff.
yeah, but I would say about this greatest hits. Yeah, if you're looking to get into it, I'm assuming I haven't done any research. I'm assuming you can still get these. I don't know if these are on Spotify. I'm assuming you can listen to them on YouTube. But me personally, I think if you haven't heard any Ambrosia, I think this is a good place to start. I mean, if anybody listens to Sirius XM, like the Yacht Rock channel, you hear plenty of Ambrosia on the Yacht Rock channel. I'm just going to tell you. But that Ambrosia is a lot different than what's here and what's on here. It's
Oh yeah,
almost a totally different band, even though it's not. But I don't know the whole background to that. I don't know why they took that much more commercial route. Do you have any idea what the why that happened or why they became more commercial or anything? I haven't read anything about it, so maybe you know.
I've never seen a real good background story on that. I can only speculate. But,
I mean, I can only speculate because they signed to Warner Brothers. So maybe that had something to do with it.
labels do like to interfere a lot. I could definitely see, but
Right. But I don't know. I think if you look at Life in LA, I think this is a fine record. I don't have any problem with it.
oh no, I mean most people know it just for how much I feel and maybe the
Hmm.
title track, but yeah, this there's a lot of cool weird songs on here, and there's even a Joe Puerta track on here, Heart to Heart, that I think if it would have been pushed as a single, it could have done just as well as How Much I Feel.
Yeah.
It's kind of in that same vein. But,
Yeah, I think you're totally on spot. I don't like I said, I don't have a problem with this record at all. But I know I'm just going to say there's a friend of mine who's a big prog guy, and he thinks those first two records are absolutely, as far as American prog. God, I screwed that up. I'll fix it. Okay, let me start over. 3, 2, 1. There's a guy that I know that is a big prog fan, and he considers the first two Ambrosia albums to be probably the best American prog albums ever produced. What do you think about that?
that's a
That's quite a
strong
statement.
statement. Yeah, there's a little bit of competition there. Kansas immediately comes to mind.
Oh, yeah, but I think doesn't Ambrosia predate that?
Actually, I think the first Kansas album came out in '74. So
Okay,
I mean, they're
maybe
really,
they predated it then.
yeah, Kansas was just barely ahead of Ambrosia as far as record releases.
But I do know, like in the prog community, they don't have much to say about those later records.
Oh
But
no,
compared to, well, I think the first album's brilliant. I think that the second album is also brilliant, but it's a bit more experimental. What's your thoughts on the second record?
the second record I think takes a bit longer to seep in. On initial listens to this album,
Right.
I didn't find anything on there when I was younger. It didn't hit me at all in the way some of the tracks on the first album did. It wasn't until years later that I started being able to separate
Mm-hmm.
all over the place in general. The second one feels more like uh, a full one piece album, if you know what I
Interesting.
mean.
Do you look at it as more of a, when you say one piece album, do you mean more like a conceptual release or what do
Not
you
really
mean?
conceptual, just sonically. It's the songs sound like they're coming from the same place with the overall sound.
Okay.
It's not quite the shotgun blast of this, that, and everything that the first album was.
I understand.
That one's more like a collection of songs. This is more like we went in the studio and this is where our heads are at, and these are all the songs in that vein.
Hmm. Well, the only other thing I could think of with that first album is that it was the first album. I don't know what kind of budget they had for that, but they could have went in and recorded that over a period of time to some degree.
Likely, and like
And
most
so
of
that
those,
yeah, so it may have that kind of feel. Where this, they've got, instead of Alan Parsons being a mixdown engineer, Alan Parsons is producing this.
yeah,
And it's, well, if anybody knows Alan Parsons, you know his body of work. This does, I think, to my ears, feels more like a, what should I say, more of a finished product. Though, don't get me wrong, I think this sounds great, but this, I think, might have, it just might have that Alan Parsons touch where, you know, he's in the producer's chair and, you know, I don't want to use the word manipulating, but producing the sessions to produce a more cohesive record. I don't know.
say you may be right. Say with after that, the success of Holding On to Yesterday off the first album in particular, too, they might have had a bit bigger budget and more of a label push this time.
Yeah. Any band that's going to have like a hit and also a minor hit, you know, the label's going to go, well, we'd like another one of those. The problem is when you get to this record, I don't think they get another one of those.
They did not. There's not a single song on here quite like Holding On to Yesterday.
No. And I'm not taking anything away from it. I'm just making a statement, you know. That I love the second record, so you know.
Yeah, this one's definitely a dark horse. It's one for the fans. You're not likely to hear this stuff even on a deep classic rock radio station.
Yeah, but the prog people love that record.
Oh yeah.
I would tend to think that if we're talking dark horse, I'm going to have to go with this.
I would agree. That is probably my favorite one.
But they are also going back to those prog beginnings to a certain degree on here. I think it's more of a combination of, well, you can argue with me. I mean, I don't know. This is the way I hear it. I hear a lot more prog on this record, but I also hear a lot more prog with this, but it's almost a combination with this to some degree. But there are no real singles on the final record at all.
And with that, yeah, I've always.
I'm not saying that takes anything away from it, but it's a little bit more of a harder listen, I think, than what came before.
I think to me, this being thanks to those mixtapes, virtually everything on the first side of this album was on those mixtapes. So this is kind of,
really? Okay.
as much as anything, this was my introduction to Ambrosia. So to me, it's kind of an easy listen overall.
Okay.
But I've definitely, like you were saying there, I've definitely always seen this as kind of a combination album of different things that they do. It does go back to their proggy past and also keeps that more mainstream pop sound and just all kinds of general weirdness. A Kid No More is like this high speed new wave track. I think has a xylophone bit in the midst of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this album is all over the place, and that's one of the reasons I like this so much, because it's so eclectic and it covers all the Ambrosia bases. But I do think the record company had a pretty big fail regarding singles. Feeling Alive Again, another one of those big David Pack ballads with the hooks. I think that fits perfectly in the mold of You're the Only Woman and Biggest Part of Me and How Much I Feel. That could have been a monster hit if the label would have released and pushed it. How they didn't do that, I don't know. I think they pushed, what was it? How Can You Love Me, I think, was the single from that album.
Yeah.
Nothing against that song, but
right.
if you're looking for a commercial hit, though.
I don't think Warner Brothers really pushed this so much, did they?
No,
do you remember back in the day? But why wouldn't they? Because this was a pretty big hit. This is what I understand.
And this was only 2 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what the CD looks like. Yeah, so I don't know. I can't really find much information on it to really piece anything together, you know. But I don't know, it is what it is, but I just don't remember back in the day when I was a kid to seeing any kind of promotion for Rock Island.
No, not at all. I don't think I ever heard a single thing on the radio from this, or yeah.
I mean, do you look at that? Well, you look at that album in a different way. You tend to really like it, and that was like your gateway drug into Ambrosia. But from someone else, if you're looking at, the two prog records, and you're looking at the two pop records, so to speak, do you feel that Rock Island was more like a contractual obligation record, or do you hear that at all? Because I could listen, I could hear it in that way. I'm not saying that it is, but it is a bit different than what anything else. But then again, I say that, but then I look at all the records and they're all different. So,
Yeah.
what am I? I'm just talking out my ass, so to speak. But what I'm trying to say, it is a little bit okay, considering the path that they were on with 180. I would say that Rock Island's kind of, I don't want to say it's going backwards, but they're stepping out of that pop mainframe, so to speak. Okay. So is that backwards? I don't know. But it's like going back to the roots more than, that's what I mean.
It's almost like the band is thumbing their noses at their own success or at label expectations, maybe by saying, "Oh yeah, those were big hits. We're going to be weird again. Check this out."
That's kind of the way I look at it. Seriously, I think I kind of look at it that way. But
Intentional
it's
career
fine.
suicide.
Plus, we don't know when they got signed to Warner Brothers, but the people at Warner's had us heard those first two prog records. Life in LA, like I said, does have some prog elements to it. It's a bit more watered down than, obviously, than what came before. But, the record company could have said, you know what, boys? You know, we love this prog stuff, but we would like to have some hits. I don't know. But that's what it sounds like.
I've noticed when going through this catalog that this one in particular,
Mm-hmm.
when I was re-listening, this is 1978.
Yep.
Something that came out that year was the debut album from Toto. And I noticed if you take songs from these albums
Mm-hmm.
and possibly mix them up with songs from those first two or three Toto albums,
Mm-hmm.
I think casual listeners might be fooled into thinking that's the same band. There's a very similar sound, and
Never
these
really
guys,
thought about it, but I think you might have a point.
these guys are studio pros, just like the guys in Toto were.
Mm-hmm.
They're all outstanding musicians that are more faceless to the general public,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
known to actual other musicians as great players.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, maybe the facelessness of Ambrosia might have hurt them later on, like it did Toto in some ways, because they didn't have a real strong front man. I mean, David Pack. I mean, he's a good-looking guy he writes wonderful ballads, plays great guitar. He
Mm-hmm.
could have easily been pushed as a front man image-wise,
Mm-hmm.
like back in those days. Look at stuff like Peter Frampton. I mean, he came out of nowhere,
Right.
but that image, I think David Pack could have been pushed the same way Frampton was, as this kind of yeah, ladies' man thing to help with those singles. But kind of
Well,
glad
we do know that after Rock Island, he was gone and did a couple of solo albums, which I don't think did anything.
no.
For I've never even heard them. I'm sure they followed in the vein of Michael McDonald or something like that. But I'm
Yeah,
not trying to
Michael
take
McDonald.
anything away from him. Everybody has to make a living. I get it, but I don't think I've ever heard those records, so
I
I really
haven't.
can't judge them either. So
I know there was one song on that anthology that uh, Yeah, was not on an Ambrosia album, and I believe it did have Michael McDonald on it, if I remember right.
That's probably why I threw out Michael McDonald.
Probably, I think it's "I Just Can't Let Go." It's,
It could be. I don't know.
oh
But
yeah, David Pack with Michael McDonald and James
okay,
Ingram on the lead vocals.
of course.
There's that yacht rock connection right there.
I'd have to listen to that again. I bet it's totally yacht rock. And again, I don't have any problem with yacht rock. I'm not.
No,
I like it, but it's just amazing how they progress from their beginnings of a full tilt prog band. That's all. But Bill. By that time, we're talking 180 came out. Wait a minute, Living in the USA came up. What was that? 77.
which one? Life Beyond
Life.
LA.
I mean, Life Beyond LA. I'm thinking Linda Ronstadt. Good Lord, Grant. Life Beyond LA.
That
That was
was yeah,
78,
78.
right? Well, don't forget what was happening in the 70s, all those prog bands. They were all disappearing, Even at this point, Gentle Giant, who was a big prog band, they put out Giant for a Day. We're talking about, 79, 80. All the prog bands were dying off like dinosaurs. So it was just the natural progression. So I can see where Ambrosia would make that, leap. So I don't know.
I'll say, is this cover their version of Emerson Lake and Palmer's Love Beach?
It's better than Love Beach.
Yeah, it is better than Love Beach.
I
The
saw
music
him on
and the
that
cover.
tour, I think. What?
ELP or Ambrosia?
Well, I saw Ambrosia in 1979. I think it was at, I've told this story before, but it was at no, I'm sorry. It was in Columbus, Ohio at St. John's Arena. Ambrosia opened for Foreigner on the Double Vision tour.
Nice.
So I guess it was 78. So that wouldn't have been 180. That would have been prior to that.
Yeah, that would have been Life Beyond LA.
Okay, so I saw them, and they were opening for Foreigner. And like I said, it was a Double Vision tour. And the crowd was not very enthusiastic to see Ambrosia open.
I could see that. I mean, that's my favorite Foreigner album, but I could see them at that time having a bit more of a hard rock audience than Ambrosia.
I mean, David Pack had he almost had a big kind of a frilly white, almost looked like Freddie Mercury. Not Freddie Mercury, but those type of outfits with the long
The
hanging
pirate
down.
sleeves.
Yeah, he had something like that. And the people were booing Ambrosia because they played.
Wow.
David Pack got pissed. And he got up to the microphone and went, F you, and went like this to the entire crowd. And they just kept playing until they were done. But
Nice.
it was me being like a wee lad. That made a big impression. I was going, holy mackerel, look at this. Things are getting out of control, The singer in the band's flipping off everybody. But that's what he did because the audience was just brutal. It was terrible.
It's good to hear that he stood his ground.
He
That's
did.
not something you would expect typically from, well, most people would expect from a band like Ambrosia. They probably think that whole yacht rock thing alone and not knowing the rest. David Pack's a badass guitarist, though.
Yeah, he's a great guitar player. There's some great guitar work on these records.
Yeah.
But before we go on and look at the non-prog albums, what would you rate? I'm just curious. If we're going to rate these out of 10, what would you rate them?
Wow. I hadn't really even thought about the ratings here. Just winging it.
Winging it. Just wing it, Bill.
I'm going to go 9 and 8.5. I still prefer the first album.
Really?
It has a sentimental value to me. But you never know. These things change with time.
Well, I will go on record for an American prog band. I don't think there was anybody even comes close to Ambrosia. I give both of these a 10 out of 10.
Nice.
I think they're absolutely wonderful. I don't know. Call me crazy, but if we're just looking at prog, US prog, you cannot go wrong with those first two Ambrosia albums. But then we go, Life Beyond LA. What's your thoughts on this record?
I like it quite a bit. I mean, even with the move into a bit more mainstream Toto-esque territory, um, the playing on this is great. The songs are eclectic. I mean, the title track alone, "Life Beyond LA," you just listen to that musically.
Mm-hmm.
It's all over the place. There's all kinds of changes on that song.
Well, like I said, there's still some prog elements by that time. Still, they
Absolutely.
haven't abandoned it yet. You know.
You've got these weird little songs, well, like "Art Beware" and "Apothecary." Joe Puerta has a bunch of lead vocals on this album. Of course, David Pack wrote and sang the big hit, "How Much I Feel," but really Joe kind of dominates vocally on this album,
Mm-hmm.
which I have no problem with. He's every bit as great a singer as David is. Um, he just had the misfortune of not having the hits. But
It's kind of like, if you think about it, it's kind of like the way they were in Triumph. You've got
yeah,
Gil, who's the drummer, who's sang a lot of the songs,
just not the radio hits.
just not the radio hits. And if you ever listen to radio now, you never hear anything other than the Rick Emmett sung stuff.
Yeah, I'd had no idea for many years that there was another singer in Triumph because I didn't explore the albums back in my
Mm-hmm.
younger days. So that kind of blew my mind when I found out how important Gil was to that band.
Mm-hmm.
You'd never know it just by listening to radio.
But it's funny, but if you listen to, I know we're on a tangent, but if you listen to Triumph, it's almost like two different bands.
Absolutely.
Ambrosia, though, however, you can listen to it and you can tell it's the same band. But a lot
Yeah.
of that Triumph stuff, you go, well, is this really the same band? It's funny.
Yeah, these David and Joe, their voices, well, and Burley Drummond for that matter, he does plenty of background vocals and an occasional lead. Their
Hmm.
voices tend to be more similar than the guys in Triumph. They
Yeah.
blend nicely. So sometimes you really have to stop and, is that Joe? Is that David? I don't know.
Yeah,
Have
now I'm
to
gonna have
check.
to re-listen to it again because I've never put that much thought into it. I just enjoy what has been laid down.
Have you ever really wondered about "How Much I Feel," how that became such a big hit? You look at the lyrics on that. Essentially, you're talking about a story of a guy who didn't want to give up the relationship, did it very
Hmm.
reluctantly, and then later on, he says, "How's your life been going on? I got a wife now for years. We've been going strong." And then there's just this moment where it shifts there, where he
Hmm.
says, "Oh no." Then there's just something that I've got to say. Sometimes we make love, I still see your face. And that's like,
Hmm.
whoa, what the hell happened there? And I'm thinking all the people who bought that song thinking this is just this great love song here. You're talking about a guy who is obsessing about a past relationship and
Well,
picturing
I'm gonna say that
one
this guy
here.
needs some closure. Is what I'm gonna say.
Apparently, I really wonder how many people dug deep into that lyric or even noticed it, or they just went along with the
I
chorus and
mean,
thought it was
I've
funny.
noticed it, but it's God, it's such a great single.
Yeah, it is.
Hmm.
It's a perfect pop song.
Well, it's like the Police. Every breath you take is, you know, not what you think it is. You
No,
know,
definitely.
very
Even Sting
dark.
reacted to that with "If you love somebody, set them
Hmm.
free."
Hmm. But
I think he was
anyway,
disturbed.
what would you if Life Beyond LA? How do you like? I'm just curious. We've had the two prog records. How do you feel about more of a pop element creeping into Ambrosia? Is that good or bad? What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's good in this case. I really like this album quite a bit. Um, because they still allow themselves to do all kinds of cool things.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I love how much I feel, if every song on here had been in that vein, I would have been disappointed. I'm
Right.
glad they kept the weirdness and the top-notch playing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think this album's a great success overall. The deep cuts are pretty cool.
So I'm just curious, Bill, what would you give this record?
Ah, wow.
I mean, do you think this is a good step forward? Do you think this is a step backward? I don't know. I
I
mean,
think
it's
it's a little,
almost a different band, like I said. But
to a
it's not.
degree.
But it's not.
Mm. I like the record well enough that I don't know if I'd call it a step forward or a step backward, but it's definitely not a holding pattern because it sounds so different from somewhere I've never traveled.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's a it's kind of odd to call it a progression when they're moving away from progressive rock, but it kind of is a
Yeah, but
progression.
it is a progression. The
Yeah,
band's
it's
growing
moving
to a
to,
certain degree, whether or not you agree with that or not, but they are definitely progressing.
absolutely they are. And how much of that was what they wanted to do and how much of that was label pressure,
I
we'll
don't know.
probably never know.
I
But
think it was probably a combination because Prague was on its way out anyway.
yeah,
We're talking that's pretty late.
yeah, that's right in
I
the
don't know.
early AOR era there.
Right.
Let's
So what would you rate it?
uh, I'm going to go ahead and give this one an 8.5 also.
Okay.
I like it quite a bit.
Hmm.
It's held up well for me over the years.
I would give it a solid 8.
Nothing, nothing to sneeze at.
I
I
mean, those prog records are great. Everything changes. But the thing is, David Pack knows how to write a pop song.
yes, he does.
And as we can tell on 180, he really knows how to write a pop song. So this was actually, I just wanted to say, this is actually, well, like I said, I saw him on tour in 78. And I think the first Ambrosia thing I bought was this.
That would be a whole different impression as the first.
But
Yeah,
I was like a kid when I saw Ambrosia, I thought they were top notch. Of course, when you're a kid, you take everything in, you embrace it all. So, and I
did they
remember,
play? Did they play a bunch of the earlier stuff when you saw them live?
I wish I could remember. I was like
Yeah,
13.
that's
I
been a
couldn't
while.
remember. I just remembered that I thought they were great. And I couldn't understand why the, the crowd was booing them. I didn't understand that, but I liked it well enough to get it. I remember going to Peaches Records back in the day on Morris Road in Columbus
Peaches.
when they had a Peaches there and getting this on vinyl. I was hooked. I thought, oh my god, I saw this band. I'm gonna get the record. And I've always liked 180 quite a bit, even though it's a lot more commercial. But the band, the musicianship, the songwriting is so solid.
Uh,
You know, I like it.
They have the oddity of Royce Jones singing a lead on "Shape I'm In" here, which I hadn't realized. Somehow I missed that or forgot about it.
Yeah, but he sounds great on it.
He does. It just seems odd when artists do that when you got great singers in the
Hmm.
band already to
Yeah.
bring somebody totally new in. Oh, why don't you sing one of our songs too?
Hmm.
But hey, it helps the overall variety and sound, which was one of those things that they were always going for. Um, to me, this album, I like it quite a bit. The musicianship absolutely is still there, and there's lots of cool things on it. But this particular album, I think, is very, very top heavy with those two monster singles.
Mm.
Uh, to me, You're the Only Woman and Biggest Part of Me absolutely just outshine everything on the album. Those are just such perfect pop songs that they really stand out. Maybe it's because I didn't come into this album at the time as a whole. I just knew those singles for so many
Hmm.
years before I finally dug deeper into the album.
Right.
This was kind of the last overall album that I explored from
Oh,
Ambrosia.
oh my goodness.
Yeah, so I don't have quite the history with this album as you do. Mine,
Yeah. Oh, I go all the way back to the beginning. I just think it's funny that that came out in 1980, but I saw Foreigner in 78. You think I would have bought Life Beyond LA, but no, that wasn't the first thing I got. I don't know. Weird. Doesn't mean anything. I just, when I look back, I'm going, well, why didn't I get Life Beyond LA? But I don't know.
I do that frequently for many artists and albums. Think, how did I hear that at the time and not buy this album? But yeah,
Hmm.
sometimes it's what was available at the record store, or whether I had the money, or yeah.
Could be. So, what's your thoughts on 180 overall?
Uh, yeah, overall pretty cool. It's got a little bit of weirdness on it still,
Yep.
but I will say this is my least favorite of the five.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah, maybe it's because I don't have quite the history with it that
It
I do
could
with
be.
the other four.
I don't know. I don't know. I well, see, it's my history with it has a lot to do with it probably. But I think the whole thing's strong. I don't really have anything on here that I can pick out. I mean, what are you going to do? You've got You're the Only Woman on side 1 and Biggest Part of Me ends side 2. You're going in with, Ready, which is a great, David Pack song, and you end with Biggest Part of Me on the side 2. I must say the Joe Pack songs really do stand out, I think. But Rockin' a Hard Place is good, and that's Joe. Ugh. Me personally, I don't see anything weak on this record. I think it's great. I don't know. It's going to be hard but Bill, it's going to be hard for me to critique it. So,
That's how I am with Rhode
yeah.
Island.
All
So
right. I'll give you that then. Well, we can look at Rhode Island, but I think 180 is a great record. And if I was going to recommend any record, I guess it just depends if you're a prog fan or you want more of a straight ahead pop record. But I think 180 is a good record to start, or Life Beyond LA. Actually, I probably would recommend the Greatest Hits, but this I think's a great record. I would give this, I don't know, I'd give it an 8 out of 10, me personally. What would you, I know you're not a fan of it, but what would you
oh,
give it?
I certainly don't dislike it. Like I said,
Right.
I absolutely love the singles. Those are masterpieces.
Okay.
But I'd give it a 7.5.
Okay. Well, Bill, a 7.5 is not bad.
No,
So,
it's not. It's just in relation to the rest of the catalog and how much I
hmm,
appreciate. It's just that slight bit below the
hmm.
other four for me.
All right. Fair enough. So, the next record came out in what, 1982? Rhode
Yeah,
Island came out in 82. And I'm just curious, maybe Ambrosia was doing a lot of touring prior to that, but I mean, if you think about it, from 1980 to 1982 during that time period, to have a gap that long between records was kind of, you know, unheard of. Normally, if you do that, that's a kiss of death because people would forget about you. It's not like now where people go 5 years, 6 years between records.
I
But
was actually thinking that same thing too. But then you look at the first two albums,
hmm,
75 and 76, then they
hmm,
had a 2 year wait till '78 with Life Beyond LA, and another
Yeah,
2 year wait
yeah,
till
you got a
'80.
good point. Got a point.
So, and I was kind of surprised by that because I was kind of thinking the same lines you were, that it seemed like there was a bigger gap somehow before
Hmm.
Rhode Island came out. But I guess
Could be
apparently
just
not.
an illusion.
Maybe it
But
just seemed like there was a bigger change in music between '80 and '82.
like we talked about, this marked a return to the progressive rock roots.
Yeah.
And what do you think about the whole production by James Guthrie? I'm just curious. Do you like his? Obviously, you must like his work on this
Yeah.
record.
Oh yeah, I love it. I think it sounds great. I think this is a headphone album. I've heard
Oh yeah.
complaints that the production is muddy. I
Mm.
disagree completely. It, of course, that may depend on your equipment, what kind
Oh
of
yeah.
format, vinyl
It
you
always
wear.
appear there. There's a lot of variables involved, so I would take that with a grain of salt. But it did get positive reviews when it came out, but it didn't sell. It peaked at 115 on the Billboard chart. And How Can You Love Me only managed to reach number 86 on the Billboard Hot 100.
Yeah,
They did release four openers. Welcome Home. It peaked at number 44 on the mainstream rock chart. But still, it was pretty much a failure. I don't know. I think their time had come and gone. I mean, I'm not trying to critique it, but you know, there was a lot of time between 1980 and 1982, and a lot can change within that time period. That's really what I'm saying, you know?
there were quite a bit of musical changes in that time, but
Right.
I still that as much as I love for openers, Welcome Home, and that's one of my favorite Ambrosia songs. It's a pretty weird choice for a single. And How Can You Love Me? That's another. It's for a band that's had all this ballad success. Again, why not release Feeling Alive again?
Oh,
That
well, it's
that's
all up to the record company.
Yeah, and that would seem such an obvious choice in
You're right.
hindsight,
I'm with you. But I don't know.
unless they were just deliberately trying to change the image that maybe the band themselves pushed to have something different released because they didn't want to be known as this ballady mellow band anymore.
Well, I think that's exactly why they produced this. They didn't want to get pigeonholed into that whole, you know, pop single type of, band type of thing. So I think it might have been part of it. And plus, you know what? This was the final album for Warner Brothers. They could have went, well, this is our final record. Let's just do what we want at this
Let's
point.
go crazy.
Well, it would make sense to me. That's what they would
Yeah,
do. But, like I said, what do I know? I don't.
I
Just
do want
speculation.
the artwork on this.
Hmm.
I got to point out Ralph Steadman, who is known for working with Hunter S. Thompson. Uh, this cover is awesome. This is one of my favorite covers of all time. It's just so bizarre, and Ralph Steadman has such a unique style.
Didn't Ralph do The Wall? Correct me if I'm wrong. I thought he did The Wall too.
He didn't do the wall, but it's a very similar style.
There's something about this. Well, James Guthrie for one, but
Yeah, that's definitely the connection there.
the font or the writing on it, isn't it? I don't know.
It's very similar.
It's very similar. Someone in the notes, please correct me and educate me in the notes what I'm talking about. There is a tie to The Wall and Pink Floyd for this record. I know James Guthrie is a tie, but I think the artwork, the album artwork, I'm gonna have to look now. 'Cause it's gonna drive me crazy.
Yeah, it does look a whole lot like the artwork in the lettering from the wall packaging. I did not. Yeah, I didn't think that Ralph Steadman had anything to do with the wall, but I've been wrong once or twice.
No, I'm not. I It just popped in my head because I know that there's A connection. Well, I don't know. I know James Guthrie's a connection, but I don't know what else. There's
Definitely.
something else. Ralph Steadman. Yeah. Did he do a what else did Ralph Steadman do?
He was first famous for working with Hunter S. Thompson, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and
Mm-hmm.
Rolling Stone stuff, like as in Rolling Stone, the magazine.
Mm-hmm.
The most recent thing I know him for is he's done a bunch of labels for Flying Dog Brewery. Go to your local liquor store and you can see his work on these bottles from that particular brewery, which
According to yeah, I can he did that whole artwork for Where the Buffalo Roam.
yes.
But he's also done album covers for The
Oh,
Who, Exodus, Frank Zappa.
my wife in the background here has been researching, and she said it was Gerald Scarf that did the artwork for the wall.
All right. But it does look similar though.
According to
You have
Ralph
to admit.
Steadman,
But it does look similar.
yeah, it does quite a bit. I gotta wonder if one influenced the other.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. You know, my mind, I maybe knew that at one time in my life, but now maybe I don't remember.
I hate to think of all the music trivia that's come and gone.
That's right.
The joys of aging.
So, oh yeah, the Happy Jack 45. You ever seen the Happy Jack 45? Sleeve, the UK sleeve?
Oh,
That's who it is.
cool. I did not know that.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
there
yeah.
you
Well,
go.
there's a new bit of trivia. I don't remember ever hearing
Hey,
that.
you know, Bill, we're all about educating the audience.
That's right.
Just saying. You
Or
just timed it.
educating ourselves.
We're educating ourselves and the audience. So I know what you're probably going to rate this record, but what would you give Rhode Island?
I'm giving this one a 10. I love everything on
10.
this album, really.
I mean, you're quite contrarian on this, but that's okay.
Definitely.
It's all good.
You're talking about the progressive rock audience. If you look on the Frog Archive site, you can see their ratings start high with the first album, go slightly lower with each album
Mm-hmm.
until 180. They only give it like a 2 point something out of 5
Yeah, I don't
because
get that.
Frog site. But then with this one, they get back like in say I think it's like roughly 3.5, 3.6, something like that. So
What you
obviously the
think
Frog
if,
audience.
but you think if they're going into more of that prog territory, it would rate higher than that?
Well, compared to the previous couple, yeah, I mean, it
Well, the
did.
first two, Bill, are, you know, I give those two records a 10. So, and I like 180. I like everything that they do. But, see, maybe my fault is I'm looking at the catalog as a whole. And I
Yeah,
should be looking at it as individual releases instead of comparing it to what came before and what came after. The human tends to compare a lot of stuff.
absolutely. So
And that's, you know, we look at an artist and they maybe have done just a brilliant record. But let's say they didn't do that brilliant record. How would you look at their other catalog then? We're always comparing. But I think Rhode Island's a strong release. I don't know if I'd probably give it a out of 10. I think there's a little bit of a drop off, but not by much. I'd probably give it a 7.5.
okay. So we've each given one 7.5. That's not a
Mm-hmm.
bad recommendation for the entire catalog. If that's the lowest either of us can go.
Right, because I'm not entirely convinced that Rock Island was just a contractual record, They might not have been into it 100%. Even though I don't want to be harsh on it because these guys are phenomenal players, you know? I don't know. It's complicated. And the thing is, like I told you, I can't find any information about anything. So I don't know what the motivation was. You think they could have did another 180 and David Pack could have cranked out a couple more singles? I don't know.
Yeah, I really would like to find out that why That feeling alive again thing just has plagued me for years.
Mm-hmm.
But
That's fine.
probably never know.
Well, we've almost went an hour talking Ambrosia.
That's not bad.
And what I come off with is that you can back me up. You can have your own opinion, but I don't think if you're looking into this band, yes, I think maybe the greatest hits is probably a good start. But if you would be out in the wild and you ever see any of these CDs in the wild for a decent price, well, you'll never see them because I don't think any of these Warner Brothers CDs ever sold. There were Japanese pressings. There's a whole series that's a part of this.
Yeah.
It's just that looks like the regular old Warner Brothers CD, but they've released all these in Japan prior to the domestic releases. But if I was going to tell someone if they wanted to get into this band, first of all, I'd have to ask them, I said, well, what are you really into? Do you like progressive rock or not? That's how I would approach it. But I think maybe the greatest hits for someone who's curious might be the way to go. I don't know. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's things missing on it that I
But
would like people to hear, but yeah, it is a great overall. If you don't like anything on that anthology, then you're not going to like Ambrosia.
there you go. Now, I can tell you, Bill, I've been out in the wild. I have seen that Ambrosia CD pop up from time to time used. Because think about it. Most people nowadays aren't going to go diving into the catalog unless it's you and I.
Yeah.
A lot of the people are going to listen to those hits that they hear on Sirius XM, on Yacht Rock, and they're going to go, well, this is all I need. I want those singles, And God knows if this stuff's ever going to be released ever again on anything.
Yeah, you'd have better luck. If you're looking out in the wilds, you'd have better luck looking for the records. Those
You,
are pretty easy to find
you
in
should be
general.
able to find them. Though, anymore, though, Bill, I don't know if they're that easy to find.
I'm not sure how much demand there is for Ambrosia records.
Well, they used to be dollar records, but I can guarantee you now they're little $10 records.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet there's a cutout on. Yep. There's the cutout on my Rhode Island there.
Yeah.
I think my other Rhode Island copy has.
I remember back in the day when I was a kid, I remember seeing just Rhode Island LPs in the cutout bins. It was okay. You could find Rhode Island. You could find Queen Jazz. You could find, God, what else? There's a whole bunch. The Kiss, Paul Stanley solo album or Ace Frehley solo album. You'd find those in the cut. Peter Criss was in the cutout bins. It is what it is. That's what it was back in the day. But to wrap this one up, I would say you get the greatest hits, take it for a test drive. If you like more, I would definitely pick it up. They are one of the more underrated classic pop prog bands from the United States, and they're all great players.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Do you have anything more to add before we wrap this up?
No, I think you pretty well covered it. That's stick with that anthology to start and find out what kind of stuff you like from it and go from there accordingly. If you like the proggier stuff, go back a little. If you like the poppier stuff, go forward a little. I mean, really, it's only a 5-album catalog. If you can find the records,
you should be able to find a lot of these cheap. I would imagine. Maybe.
Probably go online and find them if you're so inclined without much cost.
But I think the CDs sound fine. The remasters. I think someone had concerns that they were kind of brick walled, but I can't hear anything. I think they sound fine to me.
That I can't comment on since I still don't have the CDs.
Right. That's fine. No big. It doesn't matter. Well, they're hard to find. I'll give you that.
Yeah. I think they kind of hit in that spot there where I somehow missed them coming out. Right. I've been looking for years.
They did that reissue campaign, and they were released, and then they were out of print. That's the way it goes. All right, Bill, let's, like I said, I don't think there's any record here that we wouldn't not recommend. Oh, Bill's going to get his hat back on. Thank God. So I want to
Somewhere
thank
I've
Bill.
never traveled.
I love that. So I want to thank Bill Schuster for coming on. You'll see Bill more on the channel now. There'll be some more things coming. So I want to thank you, Bill, for coming on for your quote unquote virgin episode.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
feel violated.
you've been on programs with me, but we haven't
Yeah.
done the one-on-one. So I want to thank you for coming on. It was a great discussion. An
Well,
hour
thank you
went
for
by
having me.
like that. So I hope someone got something out of it.
Hey, if nothing else, I'm pretty sure my mom's watching.
Good. So
There you go. That's at least one
I'll
viewer.
exactly. But I'll should have this up and going, give me a couple, well, it might be like end of next week before it's up. But I'll keep you posted. And I want to thank you again for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Grant.
You got it. It was fun. All right. Take care and have a good weekend.
Thank you, too.